Welcome back to War Thunder, and welcome to the tank review on the light tank M24 from the Japanese Self-Defensive Forces. This is the first Japanese tank that I will make a review on. And because the tank is so similar to its American counterpart, the normal M24 Chaffee, I can assure you that basically all the tips and tricks and all the stats and everything is basically the same with the American version, so you can use this tank review as well for the American version. I will give you a full rundown on the statistics, will point out the important strengths and weaknesses of this tank, a comparison to its main opponents on the battlefield, and obviously give you lots of tips and tricks, and also I have really good gameplay for you, very exciting and entertaining gameplay, at least I think so. Light tanks have a very decisive role within War Thunder realistic battles. They have usually really good mobility, and they have also most of the time really great guns, in my opinion, for what they are designed to do, to engage the enemy from either the side or the rear. And the Chaffee in particular has actually, at this battle rating, a medium tank gun, which makes it all the more devastating. Light tanks are very, very unforgiving to play because of the pure lack of armor and usually the lack of survivability as well. And the Chaffee in this respect is no exception. But I have to point out, light tanks are the key to victory in the games for the Japanese and to a certain degree the Americans and the Russians as well. Although they have always other tanks that can take over that role or can apply a playstyle where it might seem like light tanks are not very useful. However, in the gameplay that I will show you, it becomes very apparent how important a light tank can be if played correctly. First of all, let's talk about the armor as usually, and as a light tank, you don't expect too much armor. However, it is still a tank, so it has more armor than most AAA vehicles. The lower glacis is around about, depending on the exact angle, around 40 millimeters effective thickness. Likewise with the upper plate, which levels out at around 45 millimeters. So you're safe from machine gun fire hull-wise, but autocannons from 20 millimeters and upwards will give you trouble. However, they still have to aim at certain parts, for example this flat part on the lower glacis, or to shot trap you here somewhere on the turret. And the turret has a little bit of angling going on, so somewhere between 38 and 60 millimeters all around. Sadly, the gun mantle has no significant overlap with the turret armor itself, except for here. Then the turret roof is also visible. It's 12.7 millimeters thick and can be overmatched if you're unlucky, and the strongest part of the armor is, surprisingly enough, the cupola. Thanks to its angling, it goes up to 80 millimeters. So don't shoot the cupola except if you have a powerful gun and you just see it, preferably with a PHE ammunition. Then the side armor is flat, 25 millimeters at the front of the vehicle, and where the engine sits, it's around 12.7, so just half of this thickness. So if you have just machine guns, or your autocannons are not very powerful, shoot here and you immobilize him and probably set them on fire. The rear of the engine is the rear of the tank is also not very heavily armored, just 19 millimeters. The roof with 12.7 millimeters, like the turret roof, is also literally better than nothing, and that's it. So the armor is not that great. However, it will save you from machine gun fire and from a lot of artillery strikes. At least the crew is relatively safe, except from direct hits, of course. The X-ray reveals that we have 4 crew members: the driver, the gunner, and the commander, all on the right hand side of the vehicle when you look at it. Just the loader sits on the left-hand side. We also have the transmission in the front, which absorbs a surprising amount of shrapnels, by the way. And also we have the engine here, and with the new update we see that it has nearly 300 horsepower. Also there are the fuel tanks. I have to say it doesn't burn too often when you get hit, but the engine obviously dies immediately. The next thing is we have 48 shots for this 75mm M6 cannon, and we can see that it is all around here and here as well. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense to take out ammunition because you mostly die with the first shot, especially when you get hit by IPHE, even in the turret, because 3 of your crew members are in the turret and the gun breach is too small to actually save you. Yeah, so the survivability is also not very good. In fact, the Chaffee, from its appearance, is a rather tall tank for a light tank. But we can see that this also has its advantages. So let's get on with the mobility. And the mobility of the M24 SDF is the very same as with the American one, which is not the SDF, but also the M24 TL, which is the dog-tag reward Chaffee, which has the only significant difference in having the T54 shot, which is an APCR with increased penetration, but not many people have it. So we have in this comparison the weakest engine with 296 horsepower, but we are also the second lightest tank with 18.4 tons, which gives us a specific horsepower to ton ratio of 16.1 horsepower per ton. That is better than the Germans. In comparison is equal to the T34 1941, but lacks in comparison to the T50 and the Cromwell 1. And the top speed is relatively good with 56 kilometers an hour. It is certainly better than the Panzer IV F2, just a little bit better than the Panzer IIIL and the T34 1941, but it lags behind the T50 and the A27M Cromwell 1. However, it has by far the very best reverse speed, but it has, with the exception of the A27 in common with the other tanks, no neutral steering. Now let me just put this in comparison or into prospect. The problem with this tank is when you get it fresh out of the box, it has the same or even less mobility in most situations than its counterparts, but it sacrifices practically all the armor for having not a big advantage in mobility, especially when being stocked. First, with a few upgrades, you get this advantage. And that is a painful experience. Yes, it's 3.7. Yes, you get through these upgrades relatively quickly, hopefully, but still, you just have to take this into account when you play this tank for the first times. And that brings us then to the firepower. And as we can see, the M24 SDF Chaffee has the very same gun as the American normal tech tree version and also the premium M24 TL version, although it's not a premium, but I digress. The trusty M6 cannon with its 75mm of caliber is very similar, if not identical, to the American M3 cannon, which is featured on the early Shermans. It features a total ammunition count of 48 shells, which is the lowest in comparison, but it is more than enough for a normal match. The reload with 6.5 seconds lies between the Panzer IV F2's 75mm KWK-40L43 and the T34 1941's 76 F34 cannon, for an A screw that is, and it also is much slower in the reload in comparison to tanks with lower caliber, like the Panzer IIIL or the T50 or the Cromwell 1 in this respect. And that gives it kind of an awkward feeling because this is supposed to be a light tank with a small rapid firing gun. but in fact it is the one-hit capability that makes this tank special. The turret rotation speed amongst those three Chafees is the only difference, but the difference is at max 3.3%. That is not too big. 21.4 seconds is the third highest amount in this respect. Just the M24 TL and the Cromwell 1 with 22.9 degrees per second are faster. So you can see that this turret rotation speed is really good, like the gun depression, which is only just second to again the Cromwell 1. The gun elevation on the other hand is the lowest, which makes kind of it really awkward or outright impossible to aim up if you're running down on a ridgeline, for example, and try to snapshot somebody that is on level ground. So keep that in mind. The gun elevation speed is kind of alright, although you should really upgrade it, like as mentioned before. That brings us to the ammunition types, of which we have three different shells, and the first is the M48 shell, which is the high explosive standard shell. With a muzzle velocity of 463 meters per second, it's not really fast, and it features 666 grams of explosive mass or TNT equivalent, but that's just good enough to punch through 10 millimeters of armor at all distances and all angles. That is rather useless. Your top mounted 50 caliber machine gun does a better job of taking out opponents that are not armored enough. The M72 shot is the stock shell, it's the armor piercing shell, and it features 110 millimeters of penetration with a muzzle velocity of 619 meters per second. So the muzzle velocity is not really high, but kind of average for this battle rating, so to speak. The damage effect is really low, and it's highly frustrating to play with it as long as you don't have the armor piercing high explosive shell. But because of the increased penetration, you should always have a few shells available to deal with heavily armored targets if you have to. The last shell type is the M61 shot, which is an APCBC APHE shell, and with 618 meters per second, it is 1 meter per second slower than the standard armor piercing shell. However, it features just 90 millimeters of penetration, which is significantly less. On the other hand, the damaging effect is superior with 63.7 grams of high explosive filling. And this shell makes the tank work, especially when you aim for the side of the vehicle. 63.7 grams of TNT equivalent is surely enough to one-shot the majority of enemy tanks if you aim for the crew compartment. And this shell makes the tank work, in my opinion. And that brings us to the second gameplay. Sadly, I had to record this from the replay, but don't worry, this will be not the last gameplay. I have one extremely good one recorded as well that I will give you after this one. But this one is a rather quick and intense one. Firing on the move is, by the way, one of the tricks that you have to learn with the Chaffee, because it takes just simply too long to break and stabilize the gun, especially at this battle rating, especially when facing tanks that have also relatively high turret rotation speeds, and you can't count on taking damage. Like this guy. This shell really hurts, and I was just not quick enough to damage this guy significantly, but it doesn't matter. And when you have a look at the minimap right now, I'm just rushing through. I just cleaned up that one side, and I could give you matches over matches that I, for example, on the new map, Korea, just swift around between the enemy spawn point and the cap circle where it was an up and down, and it was like a 20-minute match where I just simply gathered 6 kills. It was an intense match. My part of it was very decisive. However, I can't show it for you because it was literally a 20-minute match before we won. And that does not really showcase the real characteristic of this tank. This replay is one of those. 6 kills by now. And the replay took just a few minutes. What was it? 1.5 minutes? No. 3 minutes. 3.5 minutes where I just ran around and killed stuff. 6 kills is not too bad. You would agree. That's another ace match. I had so many games with 6 kills. When you are on the run, it really becomes apparent how good the tank is. And light tanks in particular, I have to say it again, thanks to their mobility, become more dangerous for the enemy team the longer they stay alive. And you can rack up insane amount of kills when you have good positions and when the enemy is just not paying attention to you. Now I thought I could beat the reload against this guy, which I indeed did, but I bounced off the upper armor. I thought I was dead, but the guy that was with me all the time saved me by blowing him up from behind. So good result right there. And that was the next match. 7 kills right there. And now onto one of those matches that I will remember for its craziness, especially in the M24. Now, I just decided to go for the A cap, because while the C cap point is also a good possibility for a light tank, I had not many upgrades on this point and I was not feeling comfortable. As you can see, I did not unlock the artillery strike to this point, and I didn't really count on my team to support me in the right way. So I decided I have to do it my own and to go for A. And A is the point where the enemy does not have really many opportunities to go around you from this side. One of the drawbacks of the Chaffee, as mentioned, is its height, its tallness in comparison to a lot of the other tanks. And also the machine gun is very prominent, which makes stealth ridgeline working, so to speak, very challenging indeed when the enemy does pay attention. So go in there and first customer, critical hit, and I just retreat. And I correct my position to still capture the point, but they now look in my direction. It would be stupid trying to trade shots with them. I don't want to lose crew members. Especially the commander is so important with the 50 cal, which is again, like with the Super Hellcat, such a highly important secondary weapon. Especially in realistic where you face so many AAA trucks or airplanes. Although the effect on airplanes is rather limited. And I saw that he didn't pay attention and I finish him off. That's my first kill. And I captured the point, so that is very good. Going for the objective is not always the right move to do, but in this case I thought it would be fun. And I got hit by an artillery strike that knocked out my gunner and my gun. So I have to repair it here. And I decide to actually stay still on this artillery strike because it is pure RNG where it hits. And when it hits me and immobilizes me while I am in the open, I'm easy picking for enemy tanks. So I'd rather get damaged in cover as to get immobilized in the open. And I retreat, I see a tank and another critical hit. Yeah, and as you can see, I don't have the crew replenishment module. And this guy gives up. So good result right there. And so because I couldn't get my commander back into working condition, so to say, I don't have the 50 cal, which will be a problem later on. And now I make a very aggressive move. I push forwards. If you can cover the distance there, you have a very good advantage position. But first, let's just casually finish off this T50. Now today is the bug where despite the gunner being knocked out, the enemy can turn their turret. At least it seems like that. So I go into cover behind this bunker, look around, and I heard an engine. very close by. So I frantically look around. Can't see anything. There it is. It's a Sherman. And a critical hit in the crew compartment. And I finish him off. Those were two rather exceptional examples where I couldn't finish the enemy. And I'm glad that this AAA is not armed with a 20mm or a 25mm autocannon. Speaking of autocannons, that duel was rather ridiculous. He took out my gunner and I get damage, but he couldn't finish me off. But I get the gunner back in position and I can finish him off. That's an ace, by the way. That's my 5th kill. Just like that. But I'm not done yet. There is still this AAA truck, this 50 cal armored. I think it's an M13. Yeah, I'm thinking with the thought of repairing here. Again, a shame. Now I'm down to just 2 crew members. And I don't have the 50 cal. The 50 cal would be so useful right now. And I abandon the repair again. Try to get a shot into this guy. Driver and engine are dead. And now I decide to just simply repair. And I get a kill assist. And again, many artillery strikes. People didn't like me being here, I guess. So yeah, you could see I was right in the action. And I was a bit lucky that I survived this engagement right there. At this point, I really was sure that I could make a glorious run if I would survive once more. Does he come around? Yes, one critical hit, taking out the gunner. I should have aimed for the front of the vehicle, where the driver and the commander are positioned, so I have to go through the rather long reload. With 2 crew members left, it's indeed a challenging thing to make the gun work with follow-up shots. And this is why the strike capability with the APHE shell is so important to allow you to continue the fight effectively. And another vehicle gets taken out just before I could take on it. But it doesn't matter. Are there any tanks looking at me? No, so I can advance over the open field. And then when you get into this position, for example early on in the match, you can decide the outcome really great. Especially when you get into an ambush position and multiple tanks are there in front of you, you actually can prioritize them and take out those that are the biggest threat to the rest of your team. For example, heavy tanks. If you eliminate a heavy tank early on, that player is gone in realistic. He does most of the time not have enough spawn points to get back, even with a AAA. And so you can weaken the enemy team by picking apart their heavy tanks. Now at this battle rating there are not too many heavy tanks. I think just the Russians have, with their KV-1, a significant amount of heavy tanks. So I try to mark this guy here if he is actually out of the spawn protection. And just before he could shoot at me, I pulled the trigger, and while the shell was in the air, his spawn protection went off, and I killed him with 1 shot. Good result right there. And there you could see how good the reverse speed is. It goes faster backwards than most of the other tanks go forwards, so that's really nice. And I hear machine gun fire. So investigate. At this point our team has decided the outcome of the battle already, and we go in. At this point I always feel kind of guilty to spawn camp. I know for many tank reviews, for many gameplays I've did it already, and you know what can you do? But this scene is very important. This Sherman just spawned. And he is not off the spawn protection cooldown. And he already killed 2 of our Panzer IVs. He aims at me. I go away out of his line of fire and let the Panzer IV take the shot. And again, while the shell is in the air, his spawn protection goes away and I kill him again. That's my 8th kill. And that's basically the battle. After this, I think nobody spawned in again. So GG to the enemy team. It was really an intense fight, I can assure you that. So, a quick look at the post-battle results. Load faster. And we can see that this indeed brought me 8 kills, 1 assist and 1 base capture. That brought me 41,000 silver lines together with 3,040 research points, and I was first in team with 2,681 score points. So good result right there. And this battle alone brought me a lot of modification research points, so I could go through another chunk of upgrades. And you could see I was still in the grind for this vehicle when I made this battle. But I can assure you that the American M24 plays exactly the same. And I am really looking forward to make the tank review on the M41 Walker Bulldog. So stay tuned for that. So I hope you enjoyed this tank review. I hope you could learn a little bit from it. And I hope it was useful at all for you. Let me know in the comment section what you think about this. Do you have other tips and tricks for me that we all can learn? Or, you know, some additional thoughts on it. Anyways, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did. It really helps out the channel greatly. Subscribe if you want to see more. And we'll see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.